news is the building renovation and expansion are near completion. The day we consecrate our new space to the worship of God and the service of God, whenever that day may be, is the day we will all get to see the new cornerstone. The new cornerstone was set into the wall near the west entrance, and in fact, if you drive down that driveway, you'll be able to see it. And I have to tell you, every now and then, I walk by to look at the cornerstone that bears the date 2020. Now, cornerstones today are more decorative than they are useful. Cornerstones today tell us the date or the time of the year, or the year when the building was completed, and sometimes they cover up a time capsule. This one doesn't, commemorating the year of that completion. But in truth, cornerstones today just aren't that necessary. When Jesus lived, however, cornerstones were truly the corner of the building. They were the first stone placed in the foundation of the building, and the cornerstone guided the position and placement of every other stone in the foundation. The cornerstone had to be true and solid, so that the foundation would be true and solid. The cornerstone determined the safety, the usability, and the value of the rest of the building. A poor cornerstone placed badly jeopardized the safety of everyone who occupied the building. Cornerstones mattered. Now, 1 Peter compared Jesus to a cornerstone. He said that Jesus was the living cornerstone that offered a solid foundation to the lives of those who followed Jesus. Those who followed Jesus and used his teachings and way of life as the foundation of their lives built their lives on the cornerstone of Jesus. Jesus' death and resurrection were the foundation for their hope and promise of new life in this world and in the world to come. Having Jesus as their cornerstone ensured the foundationing of their lives and the way they lived was true and solid. Now, as their cornerstone, Jesus caused Christians to live differently than their Roman counterparts. Those who followed Jesus practiced humility. They believed every person was created by and loved by God. Rome was the empire who believed that anyone who was not Roman was created to serve Rome. Roman superiority was their cornerstone. Now, we are here at Lakeshore because at some point, someone helped us choose Jesus to be the cornerstone of our lives. Jesus is the cornerstone of our lives because someone else taught us how to live Jesus' teachings as a foundation for our lives. At some point in our lives, someone introduced us to Jesus' promise of new life, and that person gave us the cornerstone that determined the foundation of who we are and how we live now. Now, for some of us, that person or those people were our parents. For many of us, that person or those people were special adults in our lives. And when we were children, our adults at some point had us baptized. They fulfilled their vows to raise us in an atmosphere that helped us to learn the stories, values, and way of life that Jesus taught and lived. They made sure that we had everything we needed to choose Jesus as the cornerstone for our lives, and for that we owe those adults a debt of gratitude. Unfortunately, most people under the age of 40 were not introduced to Jesus and his way. And the majority of young adults that we sometimes call millennial were not taken to church or Sunday school. And now the majority of young adults who were taken to church, who did choose to follow Jesus, who made them their cornerstone in life, have chosen to leave the Christian church because the Christian church is no longer a foundation upon which they want to build their lives. The reasons for leaving the church revolve around the belief that the Christian church has stopped following Jesus' way of life. The belief is that the church has stopped caring for the poor and is caring mostly for itself. Young adults feel as though the church talks at them rather than with them. That the church wants them to follow their rules rather than mentoring them to create rules of Jesus for their lives. The belief is the church says we love all people, but our decision to treat some people as second class does not show that love. The belief is the church wants their time, but not their ideas. The belief is the church is not genuine about addressing touchy and difficult subjects. In short, we as adults gave our children Jesus as the cornerstone of their lives, but the church we offer them now is seen as a building whose foundation is built on something other than Jesus' teachings. They believe it is a church whose foundation has too many flaws to be part of the foundation of their lives. Now, I believe that Lakeshore is a church that does want to build its foundation on the cornerstone of Jesus our Christ. I believe that our members have chosen Jesus, his teachings, and his way as our way of life. Even so, how we convey that reality is not reaching the young adults in our communities. No matter how hard we have tried to live our lives and have our church follow the way Jesus taught, that message has not penetrated the lives of the young adults in our lives, in our communities. As we stay at home during this COVID outbreak, the building expansion and renovation are being completed. Well, as soon as the factory that makes the light fixtures for the new space opens up, and as soon as the parking lot is put down and the AV system is fully installed, it will be completed. But as the building is being completed, we all have the time and the space to think about that cornerstone that is proudly sitting in the west wall. We have the time and the space to think about what it means to build the foundations of our lives and the foundation of our church on the cornerstone that is Jesus our Christ. We have the time and the space to think about how we will convey the message of the church being a valuable, true, and solid reflection of the way of Jesus' teachings to the young adults in our communities. Because we live in communities where the majority of our children and young adults have not embraced Jesus as the cornerstone of their lives. We live in communities where the young adults who did embrace Jesus as the cornerstone of their lives have either left the church due to its perceived flaws or never bothered to enter the church to begin with. Lakeshore is a congregation where the cornerstone is much more than a decoration. And we've done a good job of helping the children who come into our building claim Jesus as the cornerstone of their lives. We've helped the young adults who come into our building claim Jesus as a cornerstone of their lives. But like many young adults, the majority of those who grew up in this church have grown uninterested in the church. Jesus may be their cornerstone, but the church of Jesus Christ is no longer part of the foundation of their lives. Now, COVID has disrupted our lives in many ways, but it has provided a much-needed time out for the Christian church. The way that we do ministry has adapted. It has changed so that we can continue to worship, study, pray, meet, and grow in our faith together. And through the grace of God, we've all adapted and gone along with those changes. So the question is, how can we change? How can we adapt so that the young adults in our communities want to claim this church, this congregation, as part of their foundation for life? How can we convey the message to the young adults in our communities that who we are as a congregation is built with a solid foundation, with Jesus as our living cornerstone? How can we change and adapt so that the children and young adults who've never been introduced to Jesus want to claim him as the cornerstone for their lives? What can we at Lakeshore do? What can we change? What can we offer so that the children and young adults in our communities want, desire, are willing to make Jesus their cornerstone and the Christian church as part of their foundation for life? Well, I think the first step is for us to pray. To pray for the young adults and children that we know who either do not know Jesus or who have walked away from the church, perceiving us as having a foundation built on something other than the teachings and way of life of Jesus Christ. I invite us to picture those young adults in our lives, and then to write their names down and put them on the refrigerator, because I don't know about you, but I make trips to the refrigerator during this time. And every time we go to the refrigerator, we will see their names, and we will say to God, help us be a church that is a foundation that is appealing to these young adults. Help us, God. Then, once we know who we're praying for, and even if it's just the kid I saw on the playground, doesn't have to be a specific name, you know who that kid is. Even if it's the young adult I saw in the grocery store, whoever it is, then we ask God for the words, the courage, and the opportunity to build a relationship or a friendship with these children and these young adults. Doesn't have to be weird. Doesn't have to be creepy. It's just finding a way to interact even on a chatting level. Because when we choose Jesus as our cornerstone, it began with an adult showing us how important Jesus and the church are to them. And that began with a relationship or a friendship that started with a conversation and then an activity in which we wanted to participate. I got introduced to Jesus as my cornerstone in church choir. We didn't have a lot to do in evenings when I was a kid. And the one thing we could do in the evening was go to church choir. I wanted to go because that's where my friends were. I wanted to go because it got me out of the house on a Wednesday night. I wanted to go because it was a place I could goof around and not have my parents present. The choir director and the words of the songs introduced me to Jesus. It was a friendship, a relationship, and an activity I wanted to be part of. Now, during this time out from public life, our job is to first identify the children and young adults that we will pray for, and then pray for them. The next job is to talk to the young adults in our families and ask them what activity would cause them to want to show up and participate. Doesn't have to be an activity in a church, but an activity that the church sponsored, that they would be willing to show up and participate, that they would want to show up and participate. Ask the children in our lives what activity they want to do with us, what activity they would enjoy doing with us. Those are our assignments, because when we gather together again as a congregation, we will look at and we will admire the new cornerstone in the wall. And we can allow that cornerstone to be a very lovely decoration. Or we can put this time to good use by getting ready to help the children and young adults in our communities claim Jesus as their living cornerstone. We can put this time to good use, coming up with the activities and the people to whom we want to offer those activities and those friendships and those relationships, to invite them to be part of the activities, to begin to introduce Jesus as important to our lives, and to show that our church is more than just a pretty face. But we are a congregation built on a solid foundation of Jesus' teachings and Jesus' way of life. Now, we can say what we're doing is enough, that if people and young adults want to come, they can come to us, or we can make changes so that our children and our young adults in our communities actually want to build strong foundations in Lakeshore Church. I pray that our new cornerstone and our new building reflect the changes that we are willing to make in our church, so that we are not one of those places where young adults look at it and say, oh, it's them. I love Jesus, but Jesus people kind of creep me out. I love Jesus, but the church is not built on Jesus. I love Jesus, No, I love Jesus and I love this church because it does what Jesus told us to do. That, my friends, is a living cornerstone. That, my friends, is a solid foundation. We have work to do. How can we change and adapt as much as our building has changed and adapted so that our children and young people actually want to be here? Amen.
Amen.